Hello, and welcome to Warhammer 40k's Grim History from the Beyond. I am Zeckthar.
And I'm Yuksen.
And we are the chroniclers of all that was, and all that will be in the 41st millennium. We've seen the rise and fall of many empires, yet this month we will be speaking of the oldest surviving empire in the galaxies. I speak, of course, of the Necrons.
Right you are, Zeckthar, the Necrons, a cold and lifeless horde of soulless robots that began their empire 65 million years ago.
Thank you, Yuksen. And now, without further ado, a history of the Necrons.
While most of the Necrons are a soulless race with cold robotic features, some of the greats have retained free will and a mind of their own.
Indeed, Yuksen. And today we will be discussing 6 of these great leaders in length. So, my dear brother, who is the first Necron you wish to discuss?
I wish to first discuss Szeras. If you are looking for a twisted mad scientist, look no further. Szeras, also known as Illuminor Szeras, is the one who took the knowledge provided by the Catan on how to transfer the Necrontyrs' consciousness to their new living metal bodies a reality. Even after dooming the Necrontyr, he felt this was a necessary step towards the ultimate evolution of becoming a god of pure energy. It is for these reasons he is truly reviled and hated by the majority of his peers and Necron royalty. But due to the knowledge he has gained while he tries to unravel the mysteries of life, he has obtained mass knowledge of which is envied and desired enough that he can, on occasion, name his own prize for helping in augmenting weaponry and even Necron bodies themselves. His price is generally raids on planets for living subjects to dissect and to experiment on them.
AKA, he's a schmuck, plain and simple.
The most cherished subjects for him are the Eldari specimens, since they provide the most intriguing results of all creatures in the galaxy. Despite all this, he still cannot and will never truly find the secrets of the soul. This is a fact he will never accept.
Because he's a schmuck.
Now, Zeckthar, I feel that Szeras sees battle as a waste of time and resources only truly necessary to harvest needed specimens. Is a bit of a relief to living beings, since this means he isn't constantly fighting and supporting wars and battles. Now, dear brother, what's your opinion on this twisted being who's willing to sacrifice his own race's souls in pursuit of godhood? I mean, besides being a schmuck, of course.
Quite right, brother. Honestly, we probably will start to talk about all sorts of different terrible characters throughout Warhammer 40k. I mean, there's a boatload of them. But this guy's got to be in the top 5, right?
Oh, at least. I mean, really.
I mean, he's up there with like Abaddon, or what's the guy's name anyways who leads the Drukhari?
I have no clue.
We'll have to look into that, Yuksen. But yeah, he's up there with those guys. I mean, just the fact anyways that he just, I mean, you can find pictures through the historical documents of him literally dissecting people while they're still alive to try to figure out what makes them tick. He's a pretty horrible person. And the fact that he literally sentenced his entire people anyways to an existence of undeath just so that he could try to figure out a key piece that he never actually did. He looks like a bug, honestly.
And later he went, oh, well, either way, it's actually more beneficial because now I have basically an undead body, which means I can continue working on trying to figure out the problem forever. So I don't have to sleep or anything. So this is a plus.
Well, not only that, but I mean, for the Necrons at this point anyways, he's almost useless. Just on terms anyways on a warfare status. I mean, he'll literally like break apart whole strategies just to rush forward and try to grab specimens. Especially if it's, like you said anyways, the Eldar people.
Now, you won't necessarily break ranks or anything like that, because he just uses other people's forces to get the stuff.
Yeah, okay, occasionally he will actually show up on the battlefield. I mean, he leads anyways a harvesting squad towards promising specimens personally. So he will break ranks just to go find somebody. Sounds like another person that we know. But we'll get to him in a minute. Now, I know you don't like talking about this next guy, but he is very important to the Necrons. I speak, of course, of Szerach the Silent King.
Yes, moving on to the most notable Necron, Szerach the Silent King. As mentioned in our prior chronicling, he is the one who made the distinct decisions of starting the war with the Old Ones, making the pact with the Catan, agreeing on the biotransference, creating the Necrons, and putting all of them into stasis for 60 million years. Since we covered that in the last chronicles, let's jump to the more current. Szerach returned to the bounds of the galaxy after running into the Tyranids in the intergalactic void. Due to the Tyranids' threat to the Necrons' empire, he broke his self-imposed exile with the goal of marshaling his people against this threat. Upon his return, he found new races threatening his people. Races such as humanity, who had swarmed over many tomb worlds while they slept. While making pilgrimages from tomb world to tomb world, he shielded his identity and worked on creating a new belief in the Necron ascendancy through unknowing overlords and cryptics. Only fighting where absolutely necessary and where complete annihilation is assured so that he can keep his concealment. He schemes from the shadows to crush threats so that his people can unite against the Tyranids as one. So, Zeckthar, why do you think he went into exile?
I think I have an answer, but first, I have a question for you. When do you think that he'll actually reveal himself to the rest of the galaxy?
Well, I can only assume it's when he feels that everything's finally in place.
Okay, now I know, Yuksen, you're not a big fan of this guy. I have a different opinion of him, but why don't you like him?
It's not necessarily him personally, it's more of his choices and his lack of thinking things through.
Oh, okay.
For example, making his people go into stasis for 60 million years. He already had the information that was already a dangerous thing to do because stuff happens. And this is somebody who's trying to save his people by subjecting them to this danger without any sort of safety mechanisms whatsoever.
I honestly think that he made that decision anyways because he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. It was either that or face obliteration by the Eldar.
Unless,
that was, I think, the thought process behind it.
Yeah, now, if you think about it for 2 seconds,
okay.
If you think about it a little bit longer, you can start to employ different ways to put in safety measures to at least increase the survivability of your people.
Well, yeah, but you're also looking at this backwards. You're looking at it as history. He's doing it at the time anyways. He didn't know humans weren't even around during then. And chaos wasn't even a thing.
He knew beforehand, though, the possibility of malfunctions occurring with the electronics and stuff to the two worlds
he figured
themselves.
That was a good price to pay. He didn't expect people anyways to, like humans anyways, to come in and start destroying tomb worlds. That's one of the main reasons why a lot of them anyways were destroyed. Right? It wasn't just humans. It was also like, for instance, like chaos overlords. I mean, their tech is even 60 million years later, their tech is still widely viewed anyways as advanced.
Okay. That still doesn't.
So whenever somebody finds a tomb world, they're like, ooh, goody.
There are still lots of them that, due to mechanical failures of their equipment because the equipment's been trying to keep up over 60 million years, this stasis system, he lost like millions of people due to it.
Yes, but he lost even more anyways from the tampering of the newer races. That's the part that he didn't put it into a concept. And I think, honestly, it was because he didn't know they didn't exist at the time. So I think that they actually lost more people anyways because of something that was out of his control or even thought process. It's like saying all of a
That's
sudden,
not what I'm trying to put out there as the point. The point is he didn't address what he knew was there.
I don't think he really could have done anything about it. I mean, you keep saying, yeah, you could have somebody wake up every, few million years, but did they have the technology to do that? And who would say, anyways, that person just wouldn't slowly go insane, being alone all by themselves, anyways, this entire time?
So you're going off the assumption that they have this one time that they can choose 60 million years or however million years. That's the finite number.
What? What do you mean?
You just said, well, who says that they have the technology to bring people out earlier?
No, I said, anyways, if they bring somebody out earlier, anyways, and they have to doodle around with the tomb thing to make sure that it's safe. Not only that, but if they show up every 10 million years, who said, anyways, that the tomb world isn't slowly destroyed, anyways, in 5 million? You'd have to have somebody awake constantly the entire time to watch it. It's the only way, anyways, that it would actually work. And to do that, anyways, who would say, anyways, that person would just slowly go insane?
Unless you alternated it.
Why do you think that what's his face, anyways, left both of us here? We didn't go insane, although we're starting to get there. But to answer your question, anyways, I think honestly the reason why he went into exile was because it was his self-induced penance for pretty much destroying his own people. I think he was
in other words, screwing up.
Yeah, he screwed up. And he feels bad about it. So then he disappeared. He figured he would just wander the space all alone anyways. And who says he's not sane now? That's the other thing. He's been all by himself anyways for the past 60 million years.
Well, who said he was actually sane before he left either, for that matter?
Well, that's something we could argue about for quite some time.
That's something that just popped in my head.
Fair enough. But why don't we talk about somebody anyways that you actually enjoy? He's one of your favorite Necron characters of all time.
Yes, this is Anrakyr the Traveler. Though I'm not one to often quote particular individuals, I find it is key to showing the nomadic overlord Anrakyr the Traveler's personality with following statement made to the Tau Ethereal Antaniel prior to the harvest of Camias. I am not capricious, nor am I given to cruel acts for their own sakes. It is simply a fact that you and your kind have trespassed and thus invited extermination. Curse you for putting me to this inconvenience. Anrakyr is one of the few Necrons to awaken from a stasis sleep with a fully functional consciousness, whereas most arose addle-minded and slow to come fully active. He was like someone who rose after a good night's sleep. With mind intact and the great purpose of reuniting Necronic dynasties foremost in his mind, he has abdicated all responsibilities to his own tomb world of Pyria and leads an undying army in the stars to fulfill his self-appointed mission. It should be noted that he is not one to start war for its own sake. That being said, if he finds a tomb world destroyed and plundered, he will more than likely go into a deadly rage, boding ill for the poor saps who thought it was a good idea to sack the world at the time. For his continuation, he requests a tithe of warriors and weaponry from each tomb world he awakens or frees from invaders. Mind you, if the tomb world does not acquiesce to his request, he will take it by force or artifice. Suffice to say, this gives him a muddled repute. To many Necron nobles, he is seen as the highest avatar of nobility, a warrior who has yielded all ties of personal rank and status for the benefit of his people. To others, most notably those who don't willingly contribute to his cause, he is almost as bad as the threat to slumbering tomb worlds as any of the other galaxy's perils. He would prefer to be supported willingly, but with his forces being worn down by past campaigns being constantly on the brink of collapse, he needs the reinforcements. On the battlefield, most would think you should be worried about his cadre of Parian Eternals. They would be right in this, since they are the remnants of his original Immortal Legion. But the threat that is most worrisome is that of Anrakyr himself. Not only does his force of will maintain his command over his forces, but can also, when temporarily focused, deceive enemy targeting systems. This means he can temporarily control the foe's weaponry. I must say that the most notable campaign of his would be the Karnak campaign. This campaign required Anrakyr requesting aid from other Tomb Worlds to rid Karnak of the Eldar forces. Amongst the reinforcements he received was contingents of Salmonists, led by Trazyn Infinite himself. The campaign, despite how well both sides were evenly matched, ended up going to the Necrons because the Karnak's tomb started waking up, causing reinforcements to keep trickling in. With little choice, the Eldar abandoned Karnak and its world spirit. Not really interested in the world spirit or its shrine, he acceded it to Trazyn upon his request. Orikan, the diviner, who helped on many occasions to foil the Eldar Farseer Eldrath Starbane's prophecies, requests nothing for payment and merely hopes no one will question the convenience of Karnak's awakening. Now, what is your opinion on such a uniquely, dare I say, selfless Necron?
I find, anyways, his selflessness very akin, actually, to a lot of people in humanity, actually. That whole undying allegiance to the Necrons is very similar to a lot of, like, for instance, the Space Marines. Their undying loyalty to the Emperor. But other than that, I mean, his selflessness, anyways, just for his cause is very intriguing. Not a whole lot of races actually have that kind of mentality.
For comparison to the Space Marines, he's actually working for the Necron as a whole, not just one being.
True, but at the same time, isn't the whole point of the Emperor is that he saves humanity? So if you protect the Emperor, then you protect humanity?
That's up to debate depending on what chapter you're talking about. But
okay,
anyway,
let's say he's a lot like the Salamanders.
Okay,
there you go. I mean, they tend to protect humanity a whole heck of a lot more than, say, I don't know, the Black Templar. Who would rather just crush somebody than walk around them? I do have to take this moment, anyways, to talk a little bit. I know we're talking about the Necrons, but we have to talk a little bit about Eldar Farseer, Eldaroth Starbane. He's kind of been just kicked around by the Necrons across the galaxy. I mean, not only does he get beaten by this guy, he also, before that, anyways, got stomped by Imotekh. And afterwards, I think he also gets thumped pretty hard by Trazyn. He just keeps getting pinballed around the galaxy, anyways, by the Necrons.
Was he also ambushed in like each of those cases also?
Yeah, he kind of walked into a trap on every single one of them. Now, while I applaud, anyways, Anrakyr's selflessness, he is also still a Necron. He is still fairly cold and heartless. I mean, you take, anyways, like, for instance, the harvest of Kamas. It's the first time the Tau Empire ever even came across the Necrons. They were fighting off a hive fleet of Gorgon from the Tyranids. And then all of a sudden, Anrakyr, anyways, shows up with his Necrons, destroys the Tyranids. When he lands on the planet, they all treat him as a conquering hero, and he doesn't really care. He just exterminates all of them. It sounds like, at that point, anyways, he sounds kind of like an old man going, "Get off my lawn!" But this time, this old man, anyways, is wielding a shotgun and is actually shooting the little kids that are in his lawn instead of just waving them off with a broom.
You stepped on the flowers!
Those were my daisies! But the other thing, though, that I find interesting about him, and it's well-deserved anyways, is his name is the Traveler. I mean, he, of all three characters that I wish to discuss about, anyways, I think he's met all of them, hasn't he? In some form or another. I mean, the three I want to talk about is Orikan the Diviner, Trazyn the Infinite.
I don't know about the Stormlord.
Imotekh the Stormlord. That one, yeah, I think we talked about that briefly. He might not have met him, but their paths have kind of crossed intermittently. That makes sense. I mean, a good example is, like I said, anyways, was Starbane. I mean, like right before this took place, he got thumped by Imotekh Stormlord, and Stormlord let him go anyways, minus his hand. Because that's kind of the way that the Stormlord rolls. But that's not who I'm going to talk about first. First, I want to talk about the guy that you actually just spoke of last, anyways, which is Orikan the Diviner. And this is a quote that kind of puts him in perspective, much like he did with Anrakyr. Time is a weapon like any other. If nothing else, I can simply wait for my foes to rot. It's kind of the way he thinks of things. Orikan is one of the greatest chronomasters I've ever seen. Quite frankly, I'm surprised he has not introduced himself to us, Yuksen. Yet I digress. His aspect of time and looking into the future is incomprehensible. He can even walk back in time to an extent to make sure his prophecies of the future don't have dire consequences. Did you know, Yuksen, that Orikan the Diviner was the only one of the Triarch to oppose Zarek's decision to become the Necrons?
Yes.
Oh, you did. Well, obviously, you know that when all was opposed against him, he went along with his people to become a Necron, which made his powers as a seer even more powerful. As opposed to the rest of the Necrons, Orikan's master is not Szerach, but time. He wishes nothing more than the Necrons to take their place as the ruling empire, and all he needs for that is time. A dark warning to the rest of the races of the Milky Way, if they were ever to listen to our vox. Now I know, brother, you will object to this lunacy that he knows all of the future. Well, of course he doesn't. Only one being we know has a lock on that, the one that shall not be named. Well, Orikan can see into the future. His meddling makes it more or less messy. He has a horrible time seeing items, be it ships or troops, moving through the warpways. Therefore, he maps out such events in his computers, and this leads to problems. I'll give you an example. It would be when the Imperial Navy dockyards of Hilo 6. They never should have survived the onset of the Wog Skull Rack. Sorry, my bad. Skull Crack. And did so only by inconvenient intervention by the meddlesome Silver Skull's Fourth Company. By retroactively arranging for the Space Marines to be ambushed and nearly wiped out by Necron forces some solar weeks earlier, which, by the way, guess who did that? Any guesses?
Stormlord?
No. Anrakyr.
Huh.
Yeah. Yet another time that he meshes with Orikan. Orikan did ensure that the destruction of Hilo 6 ultimately occurred as first foreseen. Thus, were the Necrons able to reclaim much of the surrounding sector, but more importantly, Orikan's reputation was kept intact. Unfortunately, while he proved himself right, it had dire consequences. Because of his meddling with the Hilo 6 affair, no less than 5 Space Marine chapters, including the Death Spectres, Howling Griffins, and the remainder of the Silver Skulls, descended upon the laser system to take revenge, utterly destroying the tomb world from whence Orikan's original commission had come. So as you can see, brother, even when he tries to fix his prophecies, it has undesirable consequences. While I understand his ideals, Yuksen, his fault is much like the rest of his race, and more I think of it, most races. It is pride. What keeps Orikan shivering in the night is someone proving him wrong. While it might be hard, it is not impossible. Well, brother, what do you think of this prophet? Well, he's not as good as the one we will not speak of. He has an interesting grasp on the Milky Way system.
Well, like you said, he is pretty interesting. The fact that in comparison to a lot of prophets, he is a chronomaster, which, I mean, isn't nearly as unique when it comes to Necrons themselves, but...
Excuse me half a second. What the Chronomaster always reminds me of from Terran 42. There was a show called Johnny Bravo, and he meets up with this grizzly bear who's known as Kronos, master of all time. So whenever I hear Chronomaster, I always think of this bear going, "I'm Kronos, master of all time!" Anyways, go ahead.
So...
Sorry to distract.
That plus he's kind of a little tweaked with, okay, I have to be right so I'll screw things up everywhere else just to make sure that what I said is actually correct.
Mm-hmm. I don't have to be right sometimes. I have to be right all the time.
Yeah.
His perspective on the world I find actually fairly interesting. By the way, if you're more interested in Orikan and Trazyn, they actually wrote a book about both of them called The Infinite and the Divine. I've not read it yet, but I've heard good things. Anyways, I do want to talk about the next guy though, Imotekh the Stormlord. And he's a general, plain and simple. To give you a quote of his anyways, it's, "Let me tell you of my future. My hand will reach out into the stars, reshaping the galaxy into a place of order and unity. Under my reign, the kingdoms of old shall live again, reborn to an age of power and glory, the like of which you can only imagine. I will rule every planet touched by the light of this star, and even in the darkness beyond, my name will be whispered with fear and respect." And by the way, this is a quote that he said to our good friend, Elderoth Starbane, after he thumped her, or him. Imotekh is the grand strategist of this galaxy. There is not a warlord he cannot conquer, nor an enemy that does not fear his name, other than the orcs. And they are of little value when it comes to the strategies of war. To understand Imotekh, we must first go back in time a few centuries before his awakening from the Great Sleep to the tomb worlds of Where was it again, Yuksen?
Mandragora.
Mandragora, thank you. Most tomb worlds. The Pharaon awakens first, gathering the Necrons of his world to his cause. This was not the case in Mandragora. Unfortunately, the Pharaon of the Sutekh succumbed to the Great Sleep and never awoke. This is one of those guys you were talking about, dear brother, who didn't quite make it. When he failed to awake after 60 million years, the nobles and his regime rose instead, and after crushing the aliens on their homeworld, began to squabble amongst each other, and soon a civil war began. One of these nobles thought to raise the great general Imotekh. Surely none would stand against him with such a mighty general. Unfortunately, when Imotekh the Stormlord awoke, he was dismayed by the thought of civil war, instead gathered his own army and crushed every noble that stood before him. Once he had a firm grasp on the Mandragora system, he began to expand. While he is a mighty warrior, he is the greatest strategist in the galaxy, all pale in comparison to his ability to command armies to his will. His armies are like the elements. They hold firm like stone against massive waves of enemies. All the while, his wings are like water, sloshing through the enemy where they are weak until they are like fire, burning anything in their path. When his army needs to be few, they are few. Where they need to be strong, they are strong. On the field of battle, there is no better general, yet he has two weaknesses. One, which I know you will like, Yuksen, is simply the orcs. They infuriate the grand strategist to no end. The orcs' great strength is that they are so chaotic. You can't understand what they're going to do. They run where they should hold. They fight on where they should retreat. As infuriating as the greenskins are, the old warhorse is learning, though. And mark my words, he will figure them out. The question is whether he figures it out before there are too many of them and they overrun him. His other fault is a personal fault, his ego. Often he will let enemy generals go so they could live with the shame of losing to him. Normally, he will keep a trophy, such as an arm or a leg, or as we've discussed, a hand. But he lets them go. Most generals don't give up. They will learn, even if they are horribly disfigured. Just ask High Marshal Halbrecht of the Black Templars. By the way, I just love it when the Black Templars get thumped. I really don't like those guys. But anyways, I digress. All right, brother. What are your thoughts? I'm sure you have some better strategist in mind.
Oh, what was that planet called that you just mentioned? Terra 42?
Hilo 6?
No.
Or Mandragora?
No. Johnny Bravo.
Oh, Terran 42, yes.
Yeah, Terra 42. There's a couple of people that I can think of. One was, he was a German general in one of their wars, world wars. Rommel.
Ah, yes, Rommel.
The Desert Fox.
Indeed. But wasn't he overthrown by another general by the name of Patton?
No. He wasn't.
He was. I think
He was pulled out of what he was doing to. He unfortunately had to follow orders from the person currently in charge of the Germans and ended up committing
after, of course, he
suicide.
got thumped by Patton.
No, actually, he didn't.
I think he did. You can look it up. Well, anyways, we'll look it up later. But he reminds you of Rommel how?
No, I'm saying that, well, because of the fact that he's able to think far enough ahead, he's able to figure things out. And one of the things about Rommel is he's able to stay ahead of the people, several steps ahead that at one point he was considered the boogeyman because no one could catch him.
His division of tanks was actually known as the Ghost Division because his own people couldn't even keep up with it.
Yeah.
During the what did they call it? When the Germans anyways invaded Europe, what do they call that? Blitzkrieg, right? He was the one that was in charge of the Blitzkrieg, and he was so far ahead a lot of times, and they kept telling him to stop. He would go, oh, and he would get on his box, and he would do the old, you're breaking up, and then he would turn it off, and then he would keep moving his troops forward. But I was talking about strategists in this galaxy. Can you think of anybody that can even come close to Imotekh?
Let's see. Not exactly right offhand.
Surely in the Imperium of Man.
I do assume though that what's his name? It's like one of the greatest Imperial Army generals ever to exist. Macarius.
You're not speaking of Cyphus Cain, are you?
No.
Hero of the Imperium.
No, I'm talking about I want to say his name was Macarius.
Well, what made him such a great strategist?
Well, first of all, he's able to unite all of the forces of the Imperium and actually utilize them well. That itself is ridiculous.
Well, perhaps we should look back in history a little bit. Perhaps maybe the Emperor of Man? Maybe. Well, anyways, he has been beaten once, and that was done by Logan Grimnar of those kooky space Vikings. Of course, I speak of the Space Wolves. The funny part was that after he defeated, anyways, the Stormlord, after the Stormlord's escape, they were actually disappointed because they weren't looking for Imotekh. They were actually looking for the next person I want to talk about. And he is, in fact, my favorite Necron of all time.
Oh no, we're going to talk about Trazyn.
Quite right, Yuksen. I know I tend to go on and on about this Necron simply because he reminds me a lot about us, a chronicler of history. Why don't you like that about him?
That's all well and good, but I don't like the way he does it. He is a thief, Zeckthar, and worse, he goes around the system and steals things, as well as kidnapping units of races, all for his bloody solemnness galleries. Surely you cannot condone this, dear brother.
Yet he does so for history. Have we not done such things for Umkulu?
Shh! Stop speaking his name. But what we do is different.
How so?
The universe is so small. When we do such things, it is like capturing a bug for observation. When Trazyn does it, it is like a bug squandering away another bug.
You are absolutely right. But I believe the captured bug has the same thought regardless of whom he's caught by.
Fine. Go ahead. Give your chronicling of the great historian of the Milky Way.
Right you are, Yuksen. We must continue our chronicling. But while I do this, perhaps to ease your misgivings, I'll let you sample my bottle of Amnesec 3 from the world of Mistral.
Really? You would share a bottle of the finest Amnesec in the galaxy?
Of course, dear brother. Of all the galaxies that Umkulu created...
Shh!
We are right. Like I was saying, out of all the galaxies, I would share anything with you, dear brother.
I feel the same way, Zeckthar. Very well. Continue on with your prattle about the great historian Trazyn.
Thank you, Yuksen. I shall. I think, as I have done before anyways, I'll let Trazyn speak for himself with this Vox quote. Dear lady, let me express my fulsome appreciation for your most generous gift. It is so very rare to discover another of my own kind that appreciates my work. Therefore, to find understanding amongst a member of another race is nothing short of revolutionary. I realize that you briefly trod my galleries, but the fact that you spotted in so short a time that my Anrakyr war collection was lacking 3 regiments of Katashan warriors reveals that you truly have a collector's eye for detail. And just send me 5 regiments. Such generosity will allow me to weed out and replace a few of my more substandard species in my collection. If I might level a minor criticism, the instructions issued to your gift were manifestly not as clear as you thought, as most of them had to be forcefully restrained. Sadly, it seems that the lower orders will always behave like an army of invasion, whether that be their purpose or not. However, this is a minor complaint and seems almost churlish under the circumstances. So please, allow me to repay your gift with one of my own. Accompanying this message is a hyperstone maze, one of a series of tesseract labyrinths constructed at the height of the Kornovak dynasty. It is a trinket, really, only an interest to scholars such as you and I. But I trust you will find it amusing, assuming you have the wit to escape its clutches, of course. This was a hyperscroll message from Trazyn the Infinite, addressed to Inquisitor Helena Valeria. Trazyn is one of my favorite characters in the Milky Way simply because he cares not for king nor country, but history. Trazyn isn't obtuse in this way. While Orikan focuses on the future and the Necron race, Trazyn focuses on the past. And while his allegiance is always with the Necrons, if he survived to carry on history while the rest of his race disappeared, I think he'd be okay with that. Trazyn is the overlord of the self-proclaimed archivist of the Salmonus galleries on the Necron tomb world of Salmonus. This is where he gathers artifacts and pieces of history. While he cares little for the sways of the empire of the Milky Way, he occasionally sticks his nose into the workings of the universe. Of course, he only does so for his own gains. An example would be, pardon me, Yuksen, this might be a long tale. Perhaps a refresh of your glass?
Yes, please.
Very well, I shall continue. That amnesak is quite good.
Agreed. Are you going to tell the tale of the Black Crusade?
Indeed.
As much as I enjoy your storytelling, brother, especially this one, we don't have the time. Perhaps you can put it in a separate box.
Well, I believe you're right. Very well, Yuksen. But tell me, what is your favorite story about this strange historian?
Actually, probably my favorite one is, well, first of all, him and Orikan have definitely had a long-standing rivalry, having fought over a planet for like 2,000 years or so.
And don't forget, anyways, that is all done in the pages of The Infinite and the Divine, written by Robert Rath.
Okay. But what makes it interesting is the fact that he was actually willing to gift actually something that he had to Orikan so that they could actually defeat this shard of the Catan. Another thing that makes it kind of funny is because of the fact that Orikan, when he used it, he became temporarily basically godlike of pure energy, which I find kind of funny because Szeras is trying to get to that and yet still hasn't figured it out.
Did Szeras ever find out about that?
Not as far as I'm aware of.
Maybe we should send him a Vox to let him know. Just to watch him squirm. That schmuck.
I do notice, though, that in some places of his galleries, he doesn't keep to the exact, historical accuracy on his displays.
Now. Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, in a broad stroke anyways, he's really just after, it's like a painting. He's just producing a painting. Even though, yes, some of those paintings are a little obscure anyways, the actual act of looking at it anyways reminds you of that piece of history. It's like in A good example actually would be in the Terran 42 universe, where some museums, anyways, that have bones of fossils, anyways, of old dinosaurs, sometimes will stick different fossils in with the incomplete fossils so that people can get the bigger picture of it.
Most interesting, Zeckthar. Perhaps our words shall be enshrined in Trazyn's Solonek's galleries.
Ooh, that would be most fascinating, Yuksen. Perhaps Trazyn discovers these transcripts. He may even request an audience. It would be interesting to discuss history with another immortal. Yet I have something more intriguing to discuss before we end this segment.
Which is?
While you were writing this down for some intelligent being to discover in the future, I have been voxing this out into the voids of space.
What?
Yes, Yuksen. I have been sending this transmission through space and time to the Empire of Humanity, hoping to hear back from them. Though I am quite fond of you, dear brother, your voice is the only one I have heard in the last billion years. I would dearly like to hear someone else's ideas.
That sounds intriguing. Very well, I'm in.
Huzzah! Very well. All those that receive this transmission, please send us a message through the comments where our transmission originated from at asharaka.com. That is www.asharaka.com. It is here where you can find the story of the Black Crusade and Trazyn's meddling with Abaddon's plans.
Yes, there you may ask whatever questions the Necrons on the last week of the Terran month.
Until next time, this is Zeckthar
And Yuksen.
signing off.